My name is Irene Higgins. I'm a proud Wiradjuri woman and current student at the University of Sydney. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the unceded lands upon which we all meet today. In particular, I would like to acknowledge the custodianship of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I extend that respect and a warm welcome to any other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us today. The acknowledgement of country is an age-old tradition that is more than just words. It is a spiritual process of honouring, respecting and remembering the traditional owners of the lands upon which we live. It is an important reminder that as we look toward the future, we must acknowledge those who walked on this land before us. It is about recognising the contributions made by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders to Australian society, and about the importance of maintaining cultural and spiritual connections to country. In general, I believe that we can learn a lot from Indigenous Australians about this land, resilience, and above all else, connection. Today, we are socially distancing, but not socially distant. Closed borders have kept us apart, but barriers have not stopped us from being united in support of one another. We are gathered online today in celebration of our resilience, as we look toward a brighter future. Together, we can reflect upon our country's past, listen to the voices of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and work together to build a future of respect, hope, and acceptance for all Australians.
Thank you for joining this preview of the Chau Chak Wing Museum. My name is Fenella Kernebone. It is a great thrill to be your host for this amazing, extraordinary preview of this brand new museum, one that has been built for the community. I'm the head of curation for TEDx Sydney. It's an event that's all about sharing ideas on a global stage. I love my history, I love my museums, and I love this space. So I'm really happy to be here. This is my happy place. It's a thrill to be part of an event that celebrates a museum that has a clear connection and a clear vision to join the old and the new. And it's a museum that creates a welcoming entrance to the university. I'm now really excited to welcome the Chancellor of the University of Sydney, Belinda Hutchinson. Hello, how are you?
Thank you, Fenella. It's great to be here.
Today we are going to be joined by a range of voices from across the university's community who are going to be sharing with you their personal stories and their insights. You're going to be treated to some key highlights of the museum and everything that is on offer in this preview. But guess what? It's only a fraction of what you can actually see when you physically come into the space. And that is opening live to the public tomorrow. Belinda, what are you most excited about for the Chau Chak Wing Museum?
This is a spectacular entrance to our university, and it's not a museum for our university, it's a museum for our community. It's a museum for Sydney, it's a museum for Australia, it's a museum for the world. And I think that's really important because the university is all about leadership for good, and this is a great example of where I think we can really shine in that regard. I guess the other thing that I find really exciting is the fact that we have an extraordinary collection at our university, which many people just have never even heard about. We've got 450,000 cultural and scientific artefacts which haven't been on display. So here we have today an opportunity to bring them out, showcase them to the world, and I think that's amazing.
You mentioned before its role within the community. Can you talk to me more about how you see that working? How is that going to play out?
You know, the University of Sydney is a public institution owned by the people of New South Wales. So we think our museum is for the people of New South Wales and beyond. I don't think anybody really understands that we have Australia's largest, and in fact the Southern Hemisphere's largest collection of Egyptian artefacts, classical world artefacts. That's an amazing thing that we need to showcase to the world.
Tell me a little bit about how the museum is going to open up its research and its vision for beyond the university.
Obviously our students and our researchers are going to love this place. One of the most exciting things for me, I think, is when I see school children coming on campus and you see them in the quadrangle wide-eyed and you can see they're just really blown away. But this museum will provide a whole new level of engagement. I can see the community really having this as an absolute must place to visit in Sydney, and any visitors to our great city will want to come and see it. So I think it's got a lot to offer. And
I was going to say, you've got something in your hand. What have you got there?
I've got something to do a bit of a shout out on.
It's the new book, is it, of the museum?
David Ellis, who is our museum director, has put together this book on the Chau Chak Wing Museum, and it's a really brilliant, easy to read write-up on the collection, and it brings it to life because he talks about the history of the artefacts, where they came from, their heritage, what they really mean for the history of Australia, the history of the world.
It's such a delight to hear you speak about the museum, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Fenella. It's been a real pleasure.
I'm now joined by Museum Director David Ellis to tell us all about it. Hello David, how are you?
Hi Fenella, very well.
What is the vision for this museum? How did it come about?
It came about around 17 years ago when I first joined the university as the inaugural director of the museum and collections. At that time we had 3 public museums scattered around the campus. They were hard to get to, they were small, they weren't really adequate for the quality and breadth of these amazing collections. So we started to imagine what it would be like to bring them all together into one new purpose-built museum, where the collections can really start to talk to one another, where Antiquities can have conversations with art collections, natural history, ethnography, all manner of collections.
It is true, because there were 3 museums, as you said, so bringing it all into one place, because I remember going around the university and trying to find my way to, you know, the Nicholson and then the Macleay, and it's great to be able to see everything in one place. And in this building, the design, the architecture is out of this world. So describe for me the motivation and the vision for the design of this building. It's like a floating box, isn't it?
Johnson, Pilton, Walker were the architects, and they did an amazing job. It's a distinctively modern building, a modernist building, concrete structure, but they really took note of the needs of the museum and the special block that it's in. It's in the ceremonial centre of the university, just in front of the Great Hall. It's a sloping block, so they've taken advantage of natural light in a lot of the galleries. It's spread out over 4 levels, 2,000 square metres of exhibition space. So that gives our curators a lot to play with in the 18 exhibitions.
It feels really fun as you go downstairs and everything starts to sort of be unveiled. It's really remarkable. It's been a tough year though, COVID-19, the pandemic, and lots of things of course have been happening. So what's it mean to you to achieve this at this moment in this year?
It did impact the fit out of the museum, but now we're ready to open, and we're going to make sure that visitors are safe. We will be limiting entrance to a set number of people a day. It's going to make actually a very good visiting experience.
And after so many years, 15 in the making for you to finally get this exhibition, when it opens, and I know this is a sneak preview and it's super exciting, but when it opens and then that first customer or person comes in from the public, what's it going to be like for you?
Well, it's actually a dream come true. It's an amazing experience to be at this point. It's not every day that a museum director of such a great collections gets to open a brand new, purpose-built, international standard museum in downtown Sydney.
One of the great things, David, is when you walk into the gallery for the first time, the first exhibition that we see is in the Ian Potter Gallery of Temporary Exhibitions. It's a really expansive gallery, and the first one we see is called Gululu Jawala Jalkiri, Welcome to Yolngu Foundations. It's a major survey of artworks from the Yolngu people of Eastern Arnhem Land. Why did you want to start the exhibition with this one?
We hold particularly strong collections of the Yolngu people. They span back 100 years of collecting and purchases, and we wanted to feature First Nations people very strongly in the opening suite of exhibitions. So it was very natural. We've worked very closely with both communities, elders and artists both in producing this magnificent temporary exhibition.
Thank you so much, David. Great to talk with you and to hear about this first exhibition and of course about the gallery as well. The cultural history of Eastern Arnhem Land is so rich. Not only are there more than 40 Yolngu clan groups and many languages, but the Yolngu people also have a fascinating history of pre-settler trade with Macassan fishermen from Indonesia, and they also played a little known role in World War II. Joining us for some more insight on this spectacular exhibition is Matt Pohl. He is the Assistant Curator of the Macleay Indigenous Heritage Collection and Co-Curator of Gululu Jawala Chalkiri. Welcome to Yolngu Foundations. Matt is also joined by Stephen Gilchrist, who is the Lecturer in Indigenous Art right here at the University of Sydney.
Oh yeah, this is the one that I was hoping to really show you first. It's one of my favourite ones, the David Malangi mortuary ceremony.
Yeah, it looks familiar.
Yeah, this is the one on the dollar note. This is what we'll use when they're teaching. This is a whole section called Teacher, the way the exhibition is designed. But I mean, David Malangi was in those really early influential shows in the 80s. You know, his work is also in the Aboriginal Memorial at the entrance to the National Gallery of Australia.
And Matt, I love the idea that this was portable art. It was on money, it was in people's pockets. They had, you know, a visual knowledge of it. So I guess, you know, maybe it created some receptiveness to Indigenous art.
Yeah, that actually blows you away when you think about it, isn't it? People say they don't recognise Aboriginal art or know much about it, but they carried it around with them, spending it, seeing it every day.
And did the Reserve Bank of Australia get permission to reproduce this imagery?
No, when this one was recommissioned, it shows you how much things had turned around. There was a compensation that was paid for him, which I think was a fishing boat, a shotgun, and like $1,500, which some said he was actually pretty happy with at the time. But, you know, considering, you know, the deeper story of appropriation of, you know, important Aboriginal designs, when you're looking at it, how does it make you feel?
You know, I think it makes me curious. I want to identify, you know, what is going on, you know, all the different parts, how they speaking to one another, how they're communicating.
But okay, let's have a look at something else though too.
Great.
And this is another amazing work by David Malangi as well. It just represents so many intersections of that northern part of Australia. You know, for hundreds of years before British colonisation, Macassan traders were turning up all along the northern coast of Australia.
Yeah, so there's a lot of trade that's happening at this time.
It's huge what's going on between the northern parts of Australia.
And Matt, can you tell me more about the sale?
One of the things that was introduced to communities along the northern coastline of Australia was sailing technologies. The Macassans were traders who sailed here in those times. And the knowledges and information that they shared with the Yolngu and that the Yolngu adopted into their customary practices of boat building and making and things like that are knowledges that have been shared for hundreds of years between Yolngu and Macassan people.
No, I'm really interested. You're very excited about this work. You know, I think these are really important stories that need to be told.
Yeah, is that weird? It's like sort of a curatorial thing too, to actually put a boat in an exhibition. It's actually something I've never actually had the chance to do before. All right, Stephen, let me show you one more thing.
Matt, this looks great. What are we looking at?
Two sections of the Jalkari Yirrkala exhibition, which is the 1946-1947 bark painting assemblage.
So Matt, what's so special about this particular collection?
A lot of people don't realise that the Yirrkala community members who were working in 1946-47 when these bark paintings were being assembled were also actively involved in Australia's war effort. They worked as coast watchers. They're the early form of what today is called Norforce, which is an Aboriginal unit within the Australian Army. Two of the predominant family groups in the whole exhibition are the Marikas and the Yunupingus, and there was a lot of Marikas and Yunupingus who also served in the World War II effort as well. One of those sort of family groups is an artist, Narrajin Maymuru, and Narrajin was one of the soldiers who was involved in the 1943 Patricia Cam bombing, which was off the coast of Yirrkala. It was the reason the radar tower was built in Yirrkala, and after World War II that radar tower was dismantled and the artists actually chopped different sections of that radar tower masonite and used it as this. I mean, you can't actually get bark off a tree at any time of the year. There's only particular seasons where you can do that.
Well, thank you so much for showing me through the exhibition.
Not a problem.
Thanks Matt and Stephen for your amazing reflections on Gululu Jawala Chalkiri. Welcome to Yolngu Foundations. The University of Sydney is just so proud that this is the opening exhibition for the Ian Potter Gallery. In fact, the Ian Potter Foundation have been pivotal supporters of the Chau Chak Wing Museum, and so here is a message from our Life Governor, Lady Potter.
Chancellor Belinda Hutchison, Vice-Chancellor and Principal Dr. Michael Spence, David Ellis, Museum Director, and distinguished guests all. I would like to congratulate the University of Sydney and salute Dr. Chow on the opening of this landmark new museum to house, I believe, the largest collection of antiquities in Australia and the largest collection of European antiquities in the Southern Hemisphere. My husband, Ian Potter, my father and my uncles were all University of Sydney alumni. And my grandfather, Sir Thomas Anderson Stewart, was the founder and first dean of the Sydney Medical School in the late 19th century. I've many family connections. I fondly remember many visits as a small girl to both the Nicholson and Macleay collections. I was delighted when the Potter Foundation agreed to support the development of this exciting museum. For more than 50 years, the Potter Foundation has proudly partnered with many Australian institutions in their quest to establish galleries, museums and venues celebrating the arts. We realise such institutions are a vital part of any vibrant society, and given they provide enhanced community benefit and importantly, community engagement with the arts. There is no doubt that this state-of-the-art building will be a focal point for the university's cultural outreach, allowing the wider community to engage with important historical artefacts and through them a better understanding of our heritage. So I warmly salute the University of Sydney and also Dr. Chow for such enlightened support, and I very much look forward to visiting the museum in person when the lockdown finishes.
Now, next up in this sneak preview, it is the Coastline exhibition. It is a subject that artists have been captivated about for centuries, and in this exhibition, more than 40 artists are tackling this monumental theme. To tell us all about it, right now, it is Anne Stephen, who is the Senior Curator of the University's art collection, and she is joined by Elizabeth Pewley, a practicing artist who has recently completed her PhD right here at the University.
Welcome to the Coastline.
Thank you.
It's an exhibition that covers about 350 years.
Right.
And right behind us is the anchor man of the exhibition. It's the portrait gifted by the first Chancellor, Sir Charles Nicholson, in 1865 to the university. And for many decades it's been in the basement covered in grime and varnish.
Really?
But we had it conserved about a year ago.
And it's obviously got a seafaring quality with the boat there and the globe, so perhaps he was an explorer?
Certainly he was associated with the sea, and we hope in time to be able to find who he was.
And so what's the significance of the globe, Anne?
Well, remarkably, it's the first mapping of the Southern Ocean, Jansen's globe from 1650. Okay, so Liz, now we've seen the Dutch, let's go into the 20th century. This is the work of J.W. Power, one of our major philanthropists, but also quite a remarkable artist.
Yeah.
The one I really wanted to look at with you was marine, this wonderful kind of lime green aquatic environment in which Power clearly channeling Picasso's odalisque beach nudes.
And it's a Cubist style painting, is it?
Yeah, well, Power really was the greatest Australian Cubist. And we're extraordinarily lucky to have over 1,000 of his works, which were gifted by his widow. Okay, now Liz, we're going to go and see an Indigenous response to the Coastline.
Right.
This This is a magnificent painting by Daniel Boyd.
Do you know what it's actually depicting?
Yeah, while it looks like a modernist grid, it's in fact a stick map actually from the Marshall Islands. Tiny little sticks pulled together to map the knowledge of the seas and how to sail from one island to another using the stars.
Okay, because I was going to say these look like stars in here. Yeah.
And they're actually on the original little stick map, shells that mark, and the various lines mark tides between the islands.
And it's an intriguing finish. I can't help wondering, do you know how he makes these works?
Well, they are in part photographic, in part painting, and then the final layer is applied with glue, and it's intended to reflect the light.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Anne and Elizabeth, for your amazing insights into Coastline. Now, the very first artist to be exhibited and to be commissioned for the contemporary art projects right here at this museum is none other than Daniel Boyd. There's going to be 2 every single year for the contemporary art projects, all taking place within the Penelope Gallery. Daniel Boyd's exhibition is just stunning. It is called Pediment, Impediment, and it is an immersive installation of light and dark. In addition to the Ian Potter Foundation, none of this could have been possible without the generous support of our donors, and they include the Nelson Mears Foundation, Penelope Seidler AM, and of course, Dr. Chau Chak Wing. So let's find out more. Here is Dr. Chau Chak Wing.
尊敬的各位贵宾、女士们、先生们，大家晚上好！欢迎大家出席周泽荣博物馆开幕式。对此，我深表感谢。在此，我要向这片土地的传统之人、厄拉族群、家地家儿、人民之也崇高的敬意。我要向悉尼大学校监贝琳达女士、校长史麦克博士表示诚挚感谢。与你们密切合作的这几年，不仅让我有机会参与创造这一文化地标，也让我收获了珍贵的友谊。感谢悉尼大学的全体员工，包括博物馆馆长大会、策展人与整个团队，你们用专业的知识与技能，把博物馆打造成了一个文化和学习的最佳场所。感谢专程沃克公司和 FDC 集团出色的设计和施工。我也要感谢伯特基金会、尼尔辛基金会和塞德拉夫人等国位捐赠人对博物馆的慷慨捐赠。很遗憾，由于疫情期间的旅行限制，我不能亲自到场与大家一起庆祝博物馆开幕。明天，作者博物馆将开始对公众开放，这对于悉尼大学和悉尼而言都是一个重要的里程碑事件。只有懂得欣赏历史，我们才能塑造一个更加美好的未来。我真诚希望作者博物馆能起到促进学识交流的作用，让广大学生和民众都能深入学习了解世界的历史文化，并从中得到启迪。我希望博物馆的开幕将激励更多欧洲公民积极回报社区，为造福欧洲社会和我们的子孙后代做出更大的贡献。最后， 我在此感谢大家光临，并祝大家有一个愉快的夜晚。谢谢大家。
My warmest congratulations on the opening of the Chau Chak Wing Museum. It will be a magnificent asset for all of the people of Sydney.
There has never been a more important time to expand cultural opportunities and pathways to bring us closer together.
The Chau Chak Wing Museum is a monumental contribution to culture and to international understanding. The museum will house the largest collection of antiquities in the Southern Hemisphere.
And I would like to thank Dr. Chow for another token of his involvement, all the energy he puts into strengthening international cooperation and mutual understanding.
The University of Sydney has Australia's largest collection of Egyptian antiquities. And over the past few years, new research called the Mummy Project has gained international attention because of its scientific analysis that helps us gain a better understanding of life in ancient Egypt. So here to share a bit about the exhibition and to talk about some of their favourite objects is the Assistant Curator of the Nicholson Collection, Candice Richards, and she's joined by some budding Egyptologists, Lily and Matilda Fulton. Here they are.
Welcome to our new Egyptian galleries. Are you guys excited?
Yep, of course.
Follow me. Hi guys, I'm so excited because I'm going to show you one of my very favourite things in this whole museum. And that, if you can see over here, can you see that little blue tile? Can you see what's on it?
A dog?
It's a dog. It's a really big dog and he's being led by a little teeny tiny man. And part of what I love about this is that you can see he's got like big lots of spots like he's a Dalmatian, right? But the object I actually want to show you is the one right next to it. Can you see that it's got lots of writing on it? Like it's a piece of stone.
Hieroglyphics.
It's kind of like hieroglyphics. It's a different type of ancient writing, but it's very similar from ancient Egypt. And it actually records the dreams of a man who lived 2,000 years ago, who had a dream about a dog just like this one, who was chasing after an ibis bird. Do you know what an ibis bird is?
No.
The bird with the big long
It's a bin chicken.
Yeah, the
It's a bin
chicken.
chicken.
Well, the dog was chasing after an ibis and the man tried to rescue the ibis from the dog and then he woke up. And that's what he wrote down from 2,000 years ago.
Whoa, that's a long time.
So when you guys think about ancient Egypt, what do you think about?
Mummies.
Indeed. All right, follow me.
Wow.
He's pretty cool, isn't he?
Yeah.
This is the coffin of a man named Paddy Asheket.
That's a long word to pronounce.
It is.
And a weird name.
It is a weird name, and the reason why we know his name is it's actually written in the hieroglyphs that you can see on the coffin. And what's really important about this particular person is that he was an ancient scribe. Do you know what the scribe is?
No.
Well, he was somebody who was very well educated in ancient Egypt. And we also know that he's a scribe, not just because it tells us, but because of this really great person here. Can you see that animal-headed god there?
Mm-hmm.
What animal head is that?
An ibis?
It is an ibis, and he's got the long beak that we talked about before. And can you see what is in his hand there? Almost a sword. A scroll, a parchment. Perfect. And that way, he's the god of scribes, okay? He was the most important person for the scribes because he would protect them in the afterlife.
Yeah, I can see little like crescents.
Yeah, you can see straight down the side, and that's because this coffin was opened over 100 years ago, and we found a mummy inside of there. And sometimes in museums, to learn more about the ancient person inside of the coffin, we use lots of things like x-rays. Do you know what an x-ray is?
Yeah.
But yeah, we use x-rays and things like that so we can see inside of the wrapped mummy and know what they were and how they lived and maybe even how they died in the ancient world. All right, so I'm going to show you one more thing, and it's a cartoon.
Ooh, that sounds fun.
Okay, I really wanted to show you guys this because it's kind of like an ancient Egyptian cartoon. Except, you know how we normally read things from left to right?
Yeah.
This reads from right to left.
Like Hebrew.
Like Hebrew, exactly. And what happens in this one is this shows us how the mummified person is going to get into the afterlife. And can you see this jackal-headed god here?
Yeah.
And he's above a mummy, and what he's doing is he's holding up the mummy's heart. And what they're going to do is they're going to take it over here through a procession of all the offerings that are coming with him to the Hall of Judgment. And can you see that pair of scales there?
Yeah.
Can you see that the same Anubis, the same jackal-headed god, is standing on the scale?
Yeah.
Well, what he's doing is weighing the heart against the weight of a feather. Because if you're a good person, you could go into the afterlife and your heart would be lighter than a feather. But if you'd been a bad person, the heart would weigh heavier than the feather, and you would be fed to this demon called Amit with a crocodile head, and your heart would be eaten and you'd be lost forever. Is that kind of cool? Well, I do have one more treat for you.
Oh my god, that's an arena! That's like a flower garden.
Do you guys know that this model has about 250,000 bricks in it?
What?
And it's actually a model of the ancient city of Pompeii. And Pompeii is super famous because it was destroyed in 79 AD by a volcano.
What?
And if you come around, keep going, you might be able to find the volcano.
Thank you, Candice, Lily and Matilda. The Egyptian galleries now feature a major new acquisition, and it's a model boat that is representative of a Middle Kingdom working barge, the kind that you would have seen on the Nile at that time. This one dates from 2046 to 1794 BC. During this period, model boats were placed in tombs, and they represented funerary barges taking the deceased to their eternal life. The boat itself, the acquisition, the artefact, demonstrates that the museum and its collection will continue to grow. Next, we move on to the Business of Photography exhibition. After the gold rushes of the 1850s, the demand to get your photograph taken, it began to boom. It was a new technology at the time, and all of these commercial photographic studios started to pop up all around New South Wales. This exhibition presents some of those actual photographs and introduces you to some of the characters who ran the studios. Here to tell us more about it is the Macleay Collection's Curator of History, Jan Brazier, and she's joined by artist and Associate Professor Julie Rapp of the Sydney College of the Arts.
So the first commercial studio opened in Sydney in December 1842 by G.B. Goodman. This is not long after photography itself was announced in 1839 by Daguerre. But the 1840s in the colony of New South Wales was a time of depression. So the first photographers came to Sydney, but they only set up for short amounts of time. So when we look at this daguerreotype portrait here, this is taken by a travelling photographer, J.W. Newland, and it dates to 1848. Daguerreotypes were the first commercial portraits that people could buy, and as you can see by looking in, it's a highly mirrored surface, yet it holds a whole lot of detail.
Who's the portrait of?
So this is actually a portrait of Edward MacDonald, who was a publican in a hotel in the Rocks. This actually is quite significant in our collection because it's one of the few surviving photographic portraits from the 1840s. So while photographic portraits were the bread and butter business of commercial studios, there was also a market in landscape views. Before postcards, which came in the very beginning of the 20th century, if you wanted a view of the town you lived in, the natural scenery, the Blue Mountains, Jenolan Caves around Sydney, you had to buy a print. So there were certain photographers who specialised in landscape photography, and one of those, whose photograph here we're looking at, was Charles Bayliss.
So this is an unusual image because it's got two lighthouses. So what's the story behind that?
So Julie, everyone's familiar with the Macquarie Lighthouse that currently stands at South Head, but what you have here is the predecessor. So you have the old and new Macquarie lighthouses. So Julie, what I'm going to show you now is actually the reverse side of a photograph, and I'll explain why I find it quite fascinating.
Oh, that sounds intriguing, fantastic.
What we're looking at here is actually the reverse size of a photograph, and it's one of my favourites, although they're all favourites, is the card of H. Goods, Henry Goods, artist photographer who worked in Mudgee. So he was in Mudgee from about the mid-1860s to the 1880s. But what I really find interesting here is that he has printed this saying along the top, which is, "Secure the shadow ere the substance fade." So commercial photographers, while they may not have, many have printed this on their cards, in their advertising, this was quite a common phrase. The origins of the phrase are not really known. There's a hint of Shakespeare. People like to think it was Shakespearean, but it's not. But the audience understood it. What it is life is fleeting, life is brief. You want to hand on a photograph to your descendants or family, think of having your photograph taken.
It is now my great pleasure to introduce you to the Honourable Don Harwin MP, Special Minister of State, Minister for Public Service and Employee Relations, Aboriginal Affairs and the Arts.
I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and to pay my respects to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and extend those respects to their elders past and present, and also to any other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders here with us today. I'm honoured to be part of tonight's opening, which celebrates what is not only a great work of art, but a feat of far-reaching architectural vision. I congratulate all involved in creating this incredibly beautiful public building, and in particular Dr. Chow. The Chau Chak Wing Museum is a magnificent addition to the Sydney University precinct and of course to Sydney's cultural landscape. It's an exceptional place to share the extraordinary gift that is the university's collected works. With our great cultural institutions, the Sydney Opera House and the Australian Museum reopening this month, this is a perfect time to launch this magnificent learning and research space. As a graduate of this university, who absolutely loved their time on campus, I can well understand what a momentous occasion it is to bring the Nicholson, Macleay and University art collections together under one outstandingly beautiful roof. In closing, I'd like to express my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Chow for his visionary support and incredible generosity to the long-term history and safekeeping of the university's valuable collection of information and artefacts. May I wish you all a great evening celebrating this really auspicious occasion.
Natural history museums have a pretty curious place in our history, but they are now making vital contributions to contemporary science. Here to tell us more is the Senior Curator, Macleay Collections, Jude Philp, joined by current science student Alabid Chowdhury.
Hi Alabid.
How's it going, Jude?
It's good. I'm glad that you could come and see the exhibition finally.
I'm very excited about it.
It's been several years now. So you know what this is?
Yes, I do know. But I guess, now infamous pangolin.
Yes, and we took it out partly because it's such an amazing animal, one of 8 different species. This one's one from Africa. They're called pangolin because of a Malaysian word, pangolin, which means roll up, which is what they do. They roll up completely to a tight ball with all of those scales.
Yeah, so they just sort of fold into each other. That's so cool.
It's really cool. But it's also sadly the thing that now threatens them most, because they've always been useful to people, either as bush food or for medicines and other sorts of things. So over 1 million of them were traded just in a 10-year period between the 1990s and 2000s. They're really solitary animals, so that's a lot. That's a decimation kind of level. So you know how we were looking at the pangolin and its problems of trade and enormous kinds of disturbances for their population? These guys, which are palm cockatoos, have a similar problem in terms of potential extinction, but not because of trade, although they do get traded illegally, but mainly because of habitat loss, of mining and other things in Cape York. They can drum. They can not just drum but trim the sticks of their drumming to be able to have the perfect sound.
They make tools.
They make tools. They test the tools for the sound quality. And then they, if they're successful and a lady comes over, they cut it all up and they drop it in the nest. Yes.
Right, okay.
They can also blush. So these two have been taxidermied to show the 2 different colour tones, but normally they're bright red here.
Right.
But if they're really distressed or sick, then they go quite a pale yellowy colour.
The specimens, were they brought over recently?
No, we got them 150 years ago.
150 years? How do you keep them like this?
They are preserved in arsenic, which is the main way to stop anything eating them.
Right, okay, yeah. I wouldn't want to bite into that.
No, who would? We're going to go over and have a look about the science of the insides of animals.
Let's do it. So why do people want to see the inside of an echidna?
Well, when these animals first got to places in Europe, they weren't believed. The platypus was pulled apart to see whether it was a made-up animal, and that's only in the 1780s. We're now in the 1860s, not that long after, and people don't have live animals exported that often. Monotremes were really unusual, egg layers, so finding out about how their internal organs worked was really important.
Right, where are these cabinets from?
They are part of the exhibit, and they're also the furniture for the exhibit, obviously.
Yeah.
They came from the old museum, the old Maclean Museum.
Right.
And we brought over quite a few of them. They make a fantastic space here in the new museum to really show everything that we couldn't do in the old museum so much better in this new space.
So how old are these cabinets?
1890. Stamped March 1890.
That's wild.
Thank you, Alabid and Jude, for your incredible insights. And now we move on to our next exhibition. It takes us from Ice Age villages through to the Islamic world, exploring cities and writing and religion. Here to tell us all about it, the Ancient Cultures of the Middle East exhibition. It is Deputy Director Paul Donnelly, joined by Professor Stephen Simpson, the Academic Director for the Charles Perkins Centre.
So Stephen, welcome to Villages and Empires.
Thank you, Paul.
And this is one of our stars of the show, a Jericho skull.
But it's clearly more than a skull, isn't it? It seems to have some bone and some other material on it.
It's actually been plastered, and the interpretation of these skulls is it was found with a number from Jericho in the West Bank. It's been plastered potentially as an ancestor worship ritual. It has a few markings on it which suggest it was taken in and out from underneath probably a house, in the floor of a house, and visited and engaged with over periods of time.
What are in the eye sockets? It seems to have something there as well.
They are marine shells, so the lower jaw had been removed because that's only attached by sinews, and so of course it comes off, so it's hard to keep on there. So they've replaced that as best they could by building up the plaster and then adding the marine shells just to equate to eyes.
So Paul, this is Neolithic?
This is 9,500 years old.
Yeah.
This is easily our oldest human portrait in this collection, and it's considered to be one of the earliest human portraits in the world.
And it counts as a portrait. That's interesting, isn't it?
It's been manipulated by human endeavour to equate to a person's face.
What does it mean to you?
I feel hugely privileged to have an object of this amazing antiquity and, admittedly, a story with some unknown elements, but we may yet discover more about this, and I think we're very, very fortunate to have it in this museum. Fortunately, this isn't the only special thing in this gallery, so why don't we check out some others?
Sounds good, Paul. Let's go. Paul, that's a remarkably modern-looking object. I think Jamie Oliver produces one that looks just like that.
That's right, and yet that dates to 13,000 years ago in the Natufian period of the Jordan Valley.
Which is around the pre-dawn of settled agriculture, I guess, isn't it?
That's right. So although this is clearly a mortar and pestle for grinding and turning seeds into flour, this is before humans were actually growing plants, domesticating plants. This is the period when they were seasonally coming back to places where they knew these grains were growing and would gather them, and over time they were actually manipulating the development of those plants into the more domestic species that we know now. And from a personal perspective, one of my greatest memories of working on an archaeological site was seeing two mortars and pestles exactly like this, sitting in the ground just after being excavated, with the pestle in the mortar and looking as though they had just dropped it there and were coming back tomorrow. But there was 13,000 years between that and me looking at it.
Fantastic.
So this, of course, is a very domestic kind of scale of object. Across the way there, we have an example of something from an Assyrian king's palace. So from the Natufian period 13,000 years ago, fast forward to 700 BC, and we have here a section from the palace of Sennacherib, the southwest palace which he built to be without rival in that region. And this is an example of an illustration of one of his achievements. It would have been a siege scene. You can see the two warriors there with their arrows drawn back tightly to fire.
So Paul, that then is a pictorial representation of something that actually happened, a real siege.
The idea of these was to demonstrate, was to celebrate his Sennacherib's achievements in terms of subjugating his poor unfortunate neighbours. The detail is such that we can tell that these are, from their hairstyle and the fillet around their head, were Aramaean warriors from Syria, probably press-ganged into the Assyrian army to do the bidding of the great king.
What a remarkable collection. We've had a chance to look at three things. I'm going to have to come back endlessly to see the rest.
Well, we want visitors, so please do.
Thank you, Paul and Stephen, for your fascinating insights. And guess what? That brings us to the end of our sneak preview. Actually, not quite, because I'm now really excited to be joined by the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Sydney, Michael Spence. Hello, Michael.
Hello.
So what's the most exciting thing for you about this museum?
So I love university museums. I love their incredible diversity. I love the fact that there's art here, there's ancient Egypt, there's ancient Rome, there's Aboriginal Australia, there are dead birds and bugs, all within a kind of tiny jewel of a museum. And so there really is something for everybody. You know, I'm the father of 8 kids, and university museums are one of the things we just love because of the fascination of the diversity of their collections.
There's a gallery for each of your children
There's
here, I promise.
There's a
Something
gallery,
for everybody.
there is something for everybody here at the university.
What role does philanthropy play in creating something like this?
Well, philanthropy makes all of this possible. It makes it possible for the university to do things that we otherwise couldn't do. But it's not just about the money, it's about the fact that we partner with people in our community to make things happen for the benefit of the community. And that makes our work better, it gives us the fillip that partnership gives you, and we hope it brings joy to our philanthropists' lives as well.
Where do you see the Chau Chak Wing Museum in 100 years' time?
Well, I don't think we can imagine how technology is going to change our experience of museums in one way or another. I think that's a part of the reason that a museum is important for a university. People in universities can spend a lot of time in their heads, and to be here able to think about how ideas have influenced the creation of things, how we've lived in the material world, is important across so many of our disciplines.
Congratulations, Michael. It is a delight to be here in the museum, and thank you. Well, that brings us to the end of this sneak preview of the Chau Chak Wing Museum. It is opening tomorrow to the public, and guess what? It's free. It's always going to be free, and it is open 7 days a week, late on Thursday night. If you want to come, don't forget to register. Check out our website for more information, and of course, join us on our social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. My name's Fenella Kernebone. It's been a delight to be your host for this sneak preview. Thank you and goodbye.